Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning for this preparation session for the fall conference taking place next weekend. We are excited to have everyone gathering in multiple ways online and many Blue Water Campground also next weekend. Our fall conference this year is following our theme that we've used throughout the year, Courageously Choose Love. And so we'll be diving into that through some worship experiences at conference, along with the business that we need to address that we'll talk mostly about this morning. Hey, we are trying to record this and hopefully it will work and will be available for folks who aren't able to join this morning, as along with conference sessions we intend to record. So I just want to start by going through the schedule of this prep situation today and next Friday. And then we'll get into the business items. So obviously today you're already here. You got that memo. We're going to do this preparation session. It's delegates only, I believe. Some of the names aren't clear. We'll talk about that in a moment and try to get that better for conference. You should have received the conference prep document packet. It's a little bit smaller than the full conference materials. There is a link there. It's on the fall conference website. I'm going to try to put it into the chats right now for anyone who didn't see it. But that's what we're going to look at today is that conference preparation packet. It has all of the items of business. The fuller packet, hopefully today or tomorrow, will be out to you. That'll have some additional reports that might help you with some of the business items, but they aren't the action items themselves. Okay, so I think there we go in the chats. If you can see that, if you didn't get the packet, the PDF should be there now for you to take a look at, or again, it's on the fall conference website. Shouldn't need it as they're going to follow through on the slides, but it might be something you want to look at. And there is some more information in there than what is on the slides themselves. The next opportunity for preparation will be Friday evening. We'll start at 6:30 p.m. We'll do a welcome to the conference, an overview again of the whole weekend, since many people aren't here this morning. And then we will have time for Q&A on the various business items. We hope that this morning and next Friday will allow delegates a chance to ask their questions going into the business session so that everyone understands what we're doing and the procedure. And then during the session, we can focus on the decisions and the debate. So there will be opportunities for mostly questions, some dialogue, some idea sharing, but we want the business session to go as smoothly as we can. So we hope to answer all those questions in advance. That Friday night, we'll again be aiming to only enter delegates into the Zoom session. And that one we will stream to Facebook so that guests can view on Facebook. We'll do the same thing then on Saturday morning, delegates only in the Zoom meeting or in person, and then streaming to Facebook for those who want to watch. We intend to have the recordings available afterwards also. At noon, right at the end of the business session, we're planning the kind of gavel to start at 8:30. We say 8 o'clock because it does take time to get everyone entered into the meeting, both in person and online, and make sure everything's up and running. So we aim to gavel at 8:30, start our business session, be finished at noon. We think we've timed out everything based on our best guess. And we're going to close that morning with about a 30-minute worship, when we will have plans for 2 ordinations to evangelists during that time. Then we'll have an hour-and-a-half lunch break. And we'll reconvene outside of business at 2 o'clock with a prayer for peace, another worship session where we'll have ordinations to high priest, and time dependent, we may have some presentations at the end of it, kind of overview of next year's activities. And then there'll be some events Saturday evening at the campground for those who are in person. We've got some youth activities and a service project. Nothing online Saturday evening. Then again, Sunday morning, both online and in person, we have a session to go over World Conference resolutions. We'll just be presenting them and taking questions and comments. And then at 11 will be the closing worship, and that will include ordination for our 2 calls to 70. And those Saturday afternoon and Sunday mornings will just be in Zoom. The link will be on the Mission Center webpage. It'll get sent out to all delegates. It'll, I think, be in the announcements. Anybody can join on Zoom during those sessions, since we're not doing any business. Again, just to highlight for conference youth, this is for those coming in person. We don't have any online conference youth activities this year. We do have a group already registered, a pretty nice little group of kids, so we're excited to have them there. There'll be an open gym time for the younger youth, K through 6, in the morning on Saturday when we're doing the business. And then Saturday evening, like I mentioned, there'll be some Little Fish activities. That's our online ministry that's sponsoring that for in person. And then a campground service project for junior high, senior high, and adults. If you have a youth coming with you to Blue Water who's not yet registered, please do that. They've been coming in. I think we know everyone who's there, but if you haven't done the online registration for youth, please do that if they're coming with you in person, so we can make sure we have enough youth workers there. All right. Before I get into standing rules, let me just take a pause and see if anyone has any questions about the schedule or the conference overall. Okay, click the button so you should be able to unmute yourself if you have a question just about the conference weekend schedule, registration, anything like that.
Dan?
Yes.
Anne's with me today, and I didn't get your email coming on Zoom, so I did Sandy because I understood alternates were going to be delegates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then Anne is not sure whether she's registered or not, and I can't. I know I saw a list once, but I can't find it now to check on that for her. So if you could, just put down a note, let us know later or something. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, for the youth program, the games on Saturday night, would they want to have the 9 square up game to set up for the kids to use that up there on that Saturday night? We have it here with us at our house.
I will ask that, Dick. I think they have some activity planned for Saturday night, so I don't think they will need that, but I'll check with them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't see any other people unmuting or trying to ask a question. So if you have the conference prep packet, we're now on to page 3. Page 1 just has the overview of the schedule we talked about. Page 2 has sort of the outline of the agenda, and that's what we're going to be working through this morning. So you can follow along on that. First item when we start a conference are organizing actions. The first item actually before the standing rules is approving the credentials report, which really is just an opportunity in a conference or convention for delegates who may be not being seated or have an issue with which people are being seated to bring those amendments. In our context in Community of Christ, I don't think that's ever been a question or concern. And as Eleanor noted, all of the alternates are seated in open seats. So anybody who's been reported from a congregation is a delegate. You do need to register. All of you have, I think, and have gotten the email. If you might have got caught by spam or something, so we'll keep sending those. But so that's the only item to highlight, is that there are still several delegates that were reported from congregations that have not yet registered themselves, so we don't have their email on our list to send out the documents. Just for your information, according to our delegate policy, there are a total of 421 seats possible for our conference this year. That's based on each pastor and congregation financial officer as an ex officio. And then each congregation gets 1 elected delegate plus additional delegates based on their membership lists. Pastors have all those numbers. And there are 10 non-resident or Mission Center General seats and seats for Mission Center officers and field staff. So when we add all those up, there's a possibility of 421 delegates. What was actually reported from congregations was 340 delegates. So that's pastors, CFOs, people elected, and alternates. So you can see there's a big gap there on seats being reported. Some pastors, CFOs, congregation not reporting individuals. And as of right now, out of those 340 who are on the list, we have 200 who are registered. And they've signed up and given their email. So we've got another 140 to see if they'll register. So pastors have been getting updates from me of the list with those names highlighted of the people who have signed up. And I'll send out another update again after the weekend. And hopefully they'll remind those people who haven't yet signed up to do that. We know not every person registered is or reported is going to register for various reasons, but I think we'll be a little bit closer to that 340 number by conference.
Dan, in response to Eleanor's question about Ann, I just checked the most recent list and she is not registered.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So again, that'll go back out to pastors, check with, if you're not sure, like Gary did, he had that list, so check with your pastor and they can tell you if you've been highlighted there as being registered. And to all of you who are pastors or know other folks throughout the church, please encourage anyone on the list you might know to get signed up before next Friday. It saves us a lot of time and hassle on Saturday morning if everybody can do that in advance. So we're not doing those things at the last moment. So we will have a team who's checking people in, and I do want to highlight for those of you who are joining online to make your name in Zoom, have your first and last name. If you want to add your congregation, that's fine, that's not needed, but to have your first and last name. So I know when you sign into Zoom on various devices or someone else used it for you, it can switch that name. It doesn't always pop up when you enter the meeting. Try to look for that. If this is the computer you're going to use next week and your name's not set right now, you should be able to find the participants tab and see an option to rename yourself. We're going to keep asking everyone in the waiting room to do that, especially on Saturday morning when we're starting business. If we just have someone joining that says iPad or iPhone or something, we're not going to know who that is and won't be able to admit them into the meeting until we can get a name to make sure they should be in the meeting. We're trying to keep this secure. We don't want anyone Zoom bombing or causing any disruptions in our business session. Those in person, we will have a check-in table there where you can pick up your voting device that you'll use in person and get checked off the name. Again, try to come before 8:30. So we said 8 o'clock, that would be ideal. That way we can get everything settled and ready to start at 8:30. So after we give everyone an opportunity to comment on the credentials report, which again, there shouldn't be any concern, we'll approve that report, have our first number for the number of attendees at that moment, and then we will move on to the standing rules. These are again printed on page 3 in the prep booklet. First, there's just a preference that we're still operating under the COVID-19 emergency procedures authorized by the First Presidency. They aren't really impacting our conference directly at this moment, but when we had to make our decision on where to hold the conference and how to do it earlier in the year, they were still prevalent. And so the First Presidency gave all mission centers and congregations the permission to continue using electronic meetings, which are not yet authorized in the bylaws, but will be one of the World Conference resolutions. I don't believe the standing rules have changed in any way from last year. So if you were at conference, these were the ones that were approved. First rule is that the Credentials Committee is responsible for registering delegates and admitting people into the electronic meeting. The Credentials Committee will report the number of delegates at the opening of the conference. We'll likely have an update some point in the middle as well, since it does take a while to get everyone in. And any member registered as an alternate may, upon clearance, be transferred to delegate. That's already been done because of our policy. There were open seats for all the alternates, so you shouldn't have to do that on conference day. Rule 2, members shall identify themselves as required. I just said first and last name to enter the meeting, and shall maintain audio access throughout the meeting whenever present, and shall sign out upon departure before adjournment. This is if you're actually leaving the meeting. If you just need to step away, take a call, go to the restroom, something that you don't have to sign out for that. And it would be very helpful if people don't sign out. Please stay signed in throughout the meeting. If you're leaving completely, then sign out. However, no action shall be invalidated on the grounds that the loss of or poor quality of individual connection prevented participation in the meeting. And the chair may disconnect or mute the member's connection if it is causing undue interference. And really in the meeting, everyone will be muted. The chair will just unmute when a person is recognized. Three, no member may speak and debate more than once on the same question for longer than 3 minutes without permission of the conference granted by 2/3 vote, with the exception that the mover of the motion and the first speaker in opposition are allowed 5 minutes. And the individuals who are providing information or reports are not governed by the speaking rules. So just to highlight a little bit then how we're going to make this work for those of you joining online. If you're using Zoom, like I mentioned, all the connections will be muted when you come in, and they'll stay muted until the chair recognizes someone. So in order to get the floor to speak, ask a question, make a motion, you'll need to raise your hand. If you want to practice that now, you can go ahead and do that. And your options are different on each phone, tablet, and computer, but somewhere you should find either under participants or possibly under where there's 3 dots and it says more. You'll have an option to see some reactions that you can use. And that's where you're going to be able to raise your hand. A couple of you trying it right now. Go ahead and look for that so you know how to access the floor in a meeting. And I want to practice taking your hand down as well. If you, for instance, want to ask a question or make a motion and someone does that in front of you, and take your hand back down. So just keep working on that. Look for that hand raising option. That's how you're going to seek the floor if you're joining online. The other things here I haven't verified, but it used to be pressing Alt-Y on your keyboard would also activate the raise hand. And if you are joining just by phone, dialing *9 is what puts you in the queue as raising your hand. Again, I haven't verified those with all the latest versions of Zoom, but I understand those might be options. So at this point, I'm going to see if my hosting option will allow me to clear all the feedback. Looks like it does. So when a motion passes and we need to start a new queue, so say we're talking about an amendment and either it passes or fails and we're back to the resolution, the chair then will clear all the feedback. So that'll take everything off the list. And we'll start again with whatever the next topic is on the motion. Now in the meeting, it probably will take a few seconds to pause there because there is a lag, with so many people joining and different connections. So sometimes you'll see some awkward pauses, but as the chair, I might have to clear that a few times, clear it once, and there'll still be a few come back in that weren't in yet. When I cleared that, clear it again, and I'll wait until everything is fully clear so that I know people might have a question on the next item we're actually on. So it looks, everything's clear that I can see. So I do want to wait here now and ask if anybody has a question about seeking the floor or speaking, or if you want to try your connection. So now if you do actually want to speak, try it out, raise your hand, and I'll start contact, allowing people to test their connections. Anyone who'd like to speak or ask a question? Richard Hamilton.
Dan, what happens for two people voting on the same machine?
So if you're joining online for the ballot elections, we'll have a system for each person to get their ballots and vote. But for these kind of hand raising votes, you would each have to join from a separate device in order to show a separate vote. So there's no option in Zoom to record multiple hands. So that would, yeah, for folks like you, Richard and Marilyn, or people, if you're joining from a congregation, I know some people are planning to all watch together in a congregation. Each delegate still needs to join on their own phone, tablet, or computer. They don't have to have the video up, but they would have to have a connection in order to click their yes, no vote when we take those votes. As far as speaking goes, it wouldn't matter, other than if one of you speak and then the other wants to speak, I may not recognize you right away, just because I might think the person has already spoken once, but I think I'll probably be able to tell where there are two people. So thanks for that question, Marilyn. That is important for everyone to know. If you're joining with others, you can all watch and speak from that one main device, but you will need to sign in order to do a hand vote, which we'll get to in a moment. We're not going to use the raise hand. We're hoping we can use the yes, no buttons, which should be right close to the raising hand. Okay, so we're going to keep going through the standing rules then. The next few are related to the budget and some other motions. Number 4 is that the Mission Center budget shall be considered as a whole, meaning we don't vote on each line item, we vote on the whole budget. After the Mission Center financial officer designee has given explanation and information to the conference, discussion and amendments on line items will be in order. So we can talk about the whole budget. You can move, more money from one expense to the other and that sort of thing. But in the end, then we vote on the whole budget, not on separate line items. Next, the Mission Center president shall formulate and adjust the agenda as required. The printed agenda is for guidance only. And 6, a motion for the previous question will apply only to the immediately pending question unless otherwise noted by the body. So previous question is a motion to close debate. So we stop debate. This is saying that if, let's say, we have a resolution on the floor, someone has made an amendment, and maybe there's a second amendment, or we then have a motion to refer it to a committee. When someone calls for previous question or they ask to close debate, it's only on that very item that's in front of us. So for example, we have resolution 3, someone's made an amendment, we've been debating the amendment, someone moves previous question, that means we would vote, are we ready to close debate on the amendment only? If that passes, we would close the debate, take the vote on the amendment, and then go back to the resolution, which would continue debate. So unless someone says they're moving to close debate on all pending matters, or say both amendments, whatever the situation, unless they say otherwise, it only applies to the single item before the conference, not the whole series. And finally, business may be conducted by unanimous consent. The chair may also conduct viva voce votes by voice. In cases when a rising vote or ballot is desired or required, an electronic response system may be utilized. So this outlines the voting options. So the first one's by unanimous consent. The chair will likely use this in cases where it seems like there would be no objection. For example, the credentials report. Everyone who's been reported is on the delegate list. There should be no problems. Chair will ask if there are any objections, pause, wait for anyone to raise a hand or voice anything. If there is one, that's unanimous consent. Doesn't mean you necessarily agree. It just means no one has any objection to approving it. So you might know you're one or two or three, people who would possibly oppose it out of 300, and it's not worth taking any other type of vote. So we'll try that sometimes. The chair may try that. And if you have an objection, absolutely, as a member, you always can object to unanimous consent. That doesn't mean you're opposed to the resolution or motion. It just means you think there should be a vote taken, not just unanimous consent. So then the next easiest vote, when everyone's together, is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no. That really does not work in any way on Zoom because people can't unmute together and there's no way to hear the number of people saying yes or no. So we just won't use that in this context. So after that, you can use a hand or rising vote, and we will try to use that for things like the budget, resolutions, etc. And that's where we're going to practice right now. So let's just say there's an amendment to resolution 3. We've finished our discussion and we want to take the vote, and the chair is going to say those in favor of the amendment vote yes, and those opposed vote no. Everyone in person is going to have the little voting devices, and they're going to have it up on the screen there at Blue Water, and you'll be able to vote yes or no, and we'll get a total for all those there. For those of you on Zoom, if you can go to the same place where you found your raise hand, I believe it'll be near that. You should find a little green check yes or a red X no. And so you'll be able to click that, and it should stay up there as long as you leave it there and don't change it until the chair clears it. So I see people trying that. Go ahead and try to find that now. And as the chair, I see a running total of the number of green checks and red X's. So we've got 37 participants in the meeting right now. Chair's not able to vote, so we should be looking for 36 responses. So I'm gonna wait and see if all of you can find that option, because this is how you're gonna vote on a resolution. And so again, like I mentioned before, this is where you need to have your own connection in order to click your yes or no vote on a resolution. You do not have to vote. I'll also lay that out. You can abstain is the word for that on any questions. So again, the chair won't always announce a vote. It's not necessary to announce the numbers unless it's been ordered to have a counted vote. So in this case, I can see there are 25 in favor and there are 5 opposed right now. And I would look at that number and then I'll add in whatever we have in person there at Blue Water. So maybe our total there will be 30 in favor and 5 opposed. I'd add those up. I would see clearly there's a majority, would state there's a majority in favor and the amendment carries, or vice versa. And so again, you're going to check that yes or no and leave it up there until the chair. Really, you shouldn't have to change it at all. I will bring those down for everyone when I have a sense that all the voting is done, both in person and online, and know if the motion passes or fails. Okay, let me clear all those. Does anyone have a question about how to do the yes or no vote? Was that Dick? Do you have a question?
Dan, in such things as that, should the chairperson also have the secretary reporting abstentions?
No, in a meeting like this, we don't report abstentions, again, because we wouldn't know if a person's, like at conference, someone could go to the restroom and just not be present for a vote. So we wouldn't know how many people are actually abstaining or just not in the room at the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you're familiar with boards, and in that case, where we have a defined membership of specific people, it's important to record the yes, nos, and abstentions, but in a wide open conference like this, we wouldn't be able to.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at the voting slide that's in front of you, again, we might try unanimous consent. If it seems very procedural and no likely opposition or no reasonable opposition would likely change an outcome. We're not going to try voice votes in this hybrid scenario. Raising hands, again, that would be, if you're all together, those in favor, raise your hand, those opposed. You don't really have that because it's going to take a while to get all the votes cast. Those in person would have to keep their hands up quite a while. On the screen, it doesn't give us a number if you raise your hand. And we'd have to clear it, wait for it to fully clear, count the opposed. So likely we're only going to use the yes, no voting option because it gives a clear, you click it, it stays up there. You can change if you needed to in that time, but hopefully you're not clicking the one you want. And we can get that the quickest. Everybody can vote at one time, yes and no. We do have the option of a ballot if it's necessary for elections, or if the conference feels it's necessary on a resolution. It's very close. We want to direct exact counted number through our system. And so we've been using electionbuddy.com. I've not researched new options this year, but in the past, I've researched several different platforms and found this to be the best to fit our context and be the most cost effective for that. So those of you who've been in conference before will be familiar with this. And I won't say too much more about it now. I'm going to come back to that when we talk about the board elections. And I believe I have it set up where all of you who have registered with your email will be getting a sample ballot at 10 o'clock. So very soon here, when we get to that point, I think you'll be getting the sample ballot and we can talk more about it at that time. And then just a note on the standing rules that Community of Christ bylaws do outline that Robert's Rules of Order newly revised govern the church conferences in any cases where church bylaws or rules are not there or are not in conflict. So currently that's the 12th edition of Robert's Rules of Order. Again, if you have any questions about Robert's before the conference or during the conference, please ask those and the chair will be glad to answer. All right, take a pause. Any question on the standing rules as proposed? See anyone seeking to ask a question? So those will be the rules that will come to the body, and that will be the second item of business is to adopt those rules. That requires a 2/3 vote, and some of those items do affect speaking rights. And there should be a rule for amending the standing rules. If that got inadvertently left off. I'll check that. There might be one added in the conference packet. I think there should be a final rule on there for how to amend or suspend these rules. And maybe I didn't get them in here. But anyhow, these rules, or if I need to add that one, will be in the full conference packet. It'll come before the body, and the body can make amendments to the rules if desired, and then take a final vote to adopt them. And then there'll be that provision. If it's not in there, it's in Roberts that the body can suspend or change these standing rules later in the conference if needed. Okay, so just to refresh where we are in the meeting agenda, we're starting with those organizing reports. In practice, those should only take a couple of minutes. The credentials report, like I said, we'll probably try with unanimous consent. The standing rules will probably be our first testing of a yes, no vote. So after any amendments or discussion, I'll ask everyone to vote yes or no on approving the standing rules, and that's where everyone will get to try their voting devices in person. We'll probably have some batteries and things like that. So that first vote might take a little bit of time, but we'll hopefully then be ready for the rest of our meeting. A little different than in our normal process when we were all together is that we'll then move right into nominations for campground board elections and World Conference delegate. The reason for doing the nominations right away is so that we can then get that electronic ballot set up. It'll be preset with everyone who's already nominated in the conference packet, but if any new nominations come from the floor, we will add them at that time, get them into the system so that we can get the ballot ready to send out right at that time and let people vote throughout the meeting. So for campground elections, you want to look in your packet. The nominees that we currently have are in there. They're listed on, starting on page 12. There are 5 seats available for each campground board. See that currently we have 2 nominees for Blue Water. There's 1 printed for Park of the Pines. Actually received 1 more for Park of the Pines. That will be in the conference packet. And then for Sanford, there were several already submitted. I think there are 1 or 2 more beyond that list. So at this time, you're still looking for nominees for Blue Water and Park of the Pines. If you or anyone you know would be interested in those seats, please encourage them to submit that nomination before the conference so that, again, we can get the information into the ballot ahead of time. We can take nominations from the floor, it just can make the process more difficult that day. But we know for sure we will have a vote for the Sanford board since we have more than the 5 seats for nominees. If we get more than 5 for Blue Water or Park, we'll also set up those ballots. And then once we close the nominations right here at the beginning of the meeting, we'll be getting the electronic ballots ready to go. The same would apply for World Conference delegates. That list starts on page 14 in your prep session handouts. You'll see right at the beginning, Michigan Mission Center has been allocated 175 delegates. The list there was up to 64. I think we might be up to closer to 75 now, but we're still far from filling the 175 seats. So anyone you know who's interested, again, have them add their names. Given that number, I'm doubtful we're going to get 100 more nominees by the time of conference. So I don't think we're going to need to have an election, which is good because it's very hard to elect 175 positions out of a list of more than that. And the Mission Center president can continue to add and change World Conference delegates after the conference's vote. So if we get maybe 100 nominees and approve them all and have 75 seats, there is still time after that to add names to the list. And nominees can be any church members in good standing. So you'll find, I think, 1 on there right now of a member who's not from the Michigan Mission Center. Sometimes we get that from other mission centers who maybe do fill their delegation and have members who want to serve as delegates. If we have open seats, we're able to appoint people to those seats. So after we close the nominations, there will be a time where the field leaders, Locke Mackay and Dina DeVormer, will give you some updates on World Church and field items. And this is where I'll step away and work on the ballots with our tech team and make sure the ballot's all ready. And we'll be getting the ballots sent out then for at least Sanford and possibly the 2 other campgrounds. After that presentation then, I'll come back and we'll start reports of the officers. The first will be the Mission Center President report. And out of that report will come resolution 1. We're trying to keep the conference business session pretty tight, so we don't plan to give any extended presentations or reports in the morning. We'll do that later outside the business session if time permits. Our information will be in the reports and we'll get that out to people otherwise. So I might have a few brief comments, but I'll try to keep them quite brief. Again, there'll be printed materials you can read. We'll get pretty quickly into resolution 1, which has some whereas paragraphs. If you want to read those, the full text in the prep session packet is on page, well, I guess the number stopped, but if you find page 19, it's right after that. It is page 20, even though the numbering's not there. That's being submitted by myself. And the resolved paragraph is that a Michigan Mission Center diversity team be appointed annually by the Mission Center president for the purpose of gathering resources, collecting data, sharing recommendations, advising Mission Center staff and ministry leaders, providing educational materials, and pursuing projects that support and encourage efforts to enhance and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in Mission Center ministries and congregations. And in the additional information that's printed, you'll see that we have had a working diversity team forming over the past couple of years, but we want to formally recognize that team and put it in place as something the conference is endorsing. And so that's why I'm proposing the resolution. There is a list of team members that are currently serving. Back on page 11, under the whole list of officers and leaders for the Mission Center. Some of those names are going to change for people who are not planning to serve next year. So the list you're seeing on page 11 is people who are on the team to start this year, but again, in the final document, you'll see an updated list. And so if this resolution is adopted, then later in the conference, when we get to the recommendation for leaders, the diversity team member names will be listed there. Again, we can make additions throughout the year as well. So with that, I want to pause and take any questions or comments you have on resolution 1. See anyone? So again, the reason this is coming up first is 1, because it does come from me as the Mission Center president. It's part of my report, but also because we do have a line item in the budget for the Mission Center team, and later we'll have them on the list of leaders to sustain. So we want to do this and find the conference's decision on naming the team or approving the team officially. So after that resolution, then we'll continue our reports of officers. Next would be the Mission Center Financial Officer Report. I hold that title, but Jessica Montague really does most of that position still. We had that issue from a human resources situation that we think will be fixed starting next year again. But we'll have that report. It'll have current budget statements. What we'll actually take action on then are last year's financial inspection reports. Find the page number. So in your packet, that starts on page 4. I copied the image, but it's kind of small in the slides. So you'll see on page 4 is the letter to you as the conference. The person who was doing Mission Center audits for many years, Gary Dodson, passed away at the beginning of this year. And so the church changed the process from having a hired auditor, so to speak, to a localized financial inspection process. So we no longer use the term audit, because what we do internally in the church does not fit the accountant standard as an audit. And we do have some accountants throughout the church who wanted to do these for local jurisdictions. But if we use the term audit, it wouldn't meet their professional qualifications. They wouldn't be able to sign off on that as an audit. And so the bishopric has created a financial inspection packet, and Jack Tigner was gracious enough as a former financial officer and bishop here in Michigan to do that on a volunteer basis for us this year. And we'll be reaching out to him and some others who have experience in the financial field to do this going forward, along with our campground audits. So you see the first page, basically a good report. And then what's in the report is the budget income statement for 2021. These are the final year-end income and expenses. See, overall, there was no net income or loss, meaning we transferred in just the exact amount of income we needed under investment earnings to balance our expenses. And then you also see the balance sheet, which shows all of the funds held by the Michigan Mission Center, where they're located, the beginning year and end of year balances for each one of them. So the conference is asked to approve this financial inspection report. And I don't have details on all the accounts, but I can answer any overall questions you might have on the 2021. Kathy Klungel.
Dan, on the 21 financial inspection report, I'm not seeing the Grand Rapids Area Mission Fund. Didn't that begin in 2021? Or am I missing it?
Yes, we did receive those. So the Grand Rapids Mission Fund is held within the New Expressions Program Fund.
Okay.
So on that line on income, you'll see it's over $24,000. Most of that was the $20,000 for the Grand Rapids Mission Fund.
Great. Thanks for explaining.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. And I believe in the full packet, Jessica has a breakdown of the New Expressions Program Fund so that you can see that separately. Any other questions on the 2021 financial inspection report? Okay, so that is likely what we'll do first from the financial officer's report, and then we will look at the next item is consideration of the 2023 proposed budget. This is in your packet on page 7. And in your packet, there's also a narrative. So then underneath this graphic, you can see an explanation for each line item that's listed. And again, we consider the budget as a whole, but discussion and amendments can talk about changing the various line items within the whole budget. With the exception really of congregational support, because those commitments have already been made, and we will have the full list of those commitments printed in the full packet. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say the conference can't. The conference could say that that's going to be more, but it's unlikely unless congregations are truly committed to going back and increasing those numbers. So other than that 97,000 number, which has already come from the reports, the rest could be potentially changed. Any questions on the 2023 proposed operating budget? Dick Pennington?
And I look at that line of the investment earnings for the mission support. We actually earned $5,913 in 2021. And
That was
then budget for 2022 is 42, and then 2023 is 45. Where are we expecting to get such wonderful investment earnings compared to 2021?
Yes, so that's, the title there is a little misleading. That is the income available from investment earnings. And so we base that on a 4% of our investment fund. In 2020, well, every year, we only take what's needed to balance the budget. So the 2021 budget was actually much higher than the $5,000. It was somewhere near the 40,000 amount. We just didn't bring that in as income. In 2022, our budget amount is 42,000. We do expect we're going to need to bring nearly that full amount. In 2023, we're proposing 45,000. Where that comes from is the balance of our investment fund. So let me go back. We'll see the operating investment fund at the end of 2021 had a balance of 1,196,000 and a little bit more. So the spending rate we're allowed to apply to that is 4%. And so we take 4% of what we think the balance is going to be at the end of this year. And that's what we're able to put in the budget as the potential amount of income we can take. So out of 1 million, we can take 40,000.
So in other words, we draw from the investment fund rather than it's actually the investment earnings. It's drawing from the investment income that we have in the bank already.
Correct. Yeah, maybe a more accurate title there would be investment fund transfer or something like that, where every year the earnings may be well above 4%, or this year they're likely going to be below. They're probably going to be a loss at the end of year for any of you looking at the affiliate investment pool. So we're not basing that on year to year numbers. We're basing that on that 4% amount of the principal.
And I was also interested in the line above it where we're also expecting an increase in the envelope contributions.
Yeah, that's a hard number for us to project. As any congregation knows, envelope earnings go up and down. We base that as best we can on what we're seeing with trends. 2021, of course, was a unique year with the pandemic. 2022 is as well, and maybe next year with inflation, other issues will be the same. We never know. We look as close as we can onto what's coming in. I think our 2022 numbers are ahead of that 2021 number already. And so we felt like we were on a path where 16,005 would be a reasonable estimate, but that's all that is an estimate.
Of course, but hopefully, I'm glad to hear that 2022 is ahead of the 2021. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other factor for that is that people who do give on their printed envelopes tend to do so when they meet in person. And part of that, sometimes people, mark the mission center, and there was less of that in 2021. So I think we're back to a closer to normal amounts from previous years. And our to-date numbers through the end of September will be in the packet with Jessica's report. So you'll see that 2022 number to date through September, which is, we kind of project from the first 3 quarters what it's going to be with that last quarter added. Those numbers do always lag a little bit with e-tithing and reports from CFOs. They have to enter it on their system. And so the mission center is always kind of a month behind. And at least some congregations hold it until the end of the year, and we don't see those until they're finally reported. Any other questions on the 2023 proposed budget? Okay, well, thank you for those questions. Again, in the packet, you have a narrative that explains those line items. In the full conference materials, you will have the reports on 2022 numbers through September. Also, we do have information from the budget presentation back in August that had the numbers through through to the end of June. So there are some other resources, but feel free to contact myself or Jessica Montague with any questions you might want to ask before conference. After those two officer reports, then we have the reports from boards. Again, we'll have a printed report from each of the three campground boards. Those are the three boards we now have in the Mission Center in the full packet. And the board presidents will give brief highlights of those reports as well. I'll just be a couple minutes, but you'll be able to read through those. Also with the board reports, we'll have their 2021 financial statements. They've not all been completely inspected yet because of the change I mentioned with not having the World Church auditor available. We had to figure that out locally, and I think maybe just one of them still hasn't been finally audited, but we will report what we believe are the final numbers. And then they'll have their current financial reports for 2022 through the end of September. And also we'll have a list of the projects that have been approved so far for use of the campground sales funds from Camp Manitou and the Woodlands. So that'll all be in the full printed materials. And then you'll hear a few highlights of the campground board reports. And then coming out of the Park of the Pines report will be resolution 2. And this is at the back of your prep packet. Again, sorry, the page numbers didn't carry on to the resolutions for some reason. But you go towards the end and find the resolution 2 there. You'll see the full text along with some additional information. The actual resolution is what's before you here. Resolve that the Mission Center Conference grants approval for the Park of the Pines Board of Directors to borrow up to $750,000 from the Community of Christ Houses of Worship Revolving Loan Fund to replace the existing dining hall, with the project to include demolition of the existing dining hall, architectural drawings and permits, site development and infrastructure improvements, and construction of a new dining hall. So that is the question that will come from the Park of the Pines Board report. Do you have any questions on resolution 2 you want to ask at this point? Okay, I don't see any questions coming up now. So continuing on with our meeting agenda, after the board reports are reports from committees and teams. And these will be printed as well. Our spectacular delegation has a report. The existing diversity team that's been working, hopefully will be approved with resolution 1 formally, but they'll have a report already from their work this year. And then the Earth Stewardship team, which was approved by the conference almost 10 years ago now, will have a report. Those will be printed. I don't believe we'll have any verbal reports from these teams. Yeah, so during this time, when these reports are taking place, there'll actually be video reports, a couple of them, not necessarily directly from these teams, but about some of the new expressions and camping and gathering things that have happened over the last year. And we're going to play those videos during this time of committee reports, with the intention that during this time, then the chair will kind of step away as the videos play, and anyone in person who's still needing assistance on completing their ballots will be able to try to answer those questions. There are some people who don't have email addresses who will be doing paper ballots or using a computer at Blue Water. For any of you online who might have questions, we'll be trying to take those through the chat box or phone call or email, whatever needs to happen. Our hope is that during this period here of about 10 to 15 minutes when we're watching the video presentations, that we'll be able to finalize the campground elections that they'll have been open throughout the morning after the nominations. So once we're done watching those videos, if we do have a verbal report, we'll put it in there. Then we'll come to our special orders, which are those elections. So again, we've already set up the nominations at the beginning of the meeting. The ballot will have gone out to everyone with an email address. We're going to use that time right there to try to finish up any questions, with the hopes that then when we come into these items, the elections will be ready to go. If we don't have more than 5 nominees, we'll take the vote on the number we have without needing a ballot. The ones that do need a ballot, we will close the ballot, hopefully, and announce the results of those elections. If for some reason there's a tie or need for another ballot, we would then go into that process. So what I want to note at this point, it just past 10, so I think that the message from Election Buddy might have gone out or be going out. I see you nodding. Looking at my email to see if that came in. Looks like it did come to me, so it should be coming to you soon as well. You'll be getting the notice. It'll say Michigan Mission Center. The subject is Vote Now, Michigan Mission Center 2022 Fall Conference Practice Election. The actual email address that it comes from is invitations@mail.electionbuddy.com. So an issue we run into, especially this time of year with our conference, is that mail.electionbuddy.com can tend to get caught up in spam messages, as we're all getting other election related items from many people running for office. Hopefully it got through to you. This sample election just opened at 10, like I said, and it will be open until Friday at 10 p.m. So you and anyone who didn't come today should be getting this sample election if you've registered as a delegate. It means you've registered and given us your email, then I put it on the list. So those who haven't yet registered need to do that this week. I'll add them. They'll get the sample ballot as well. What you'll see when you click there is that it'll just have nominee A, B, C. No names are in there yet at this time. It's just an opportunity for you to practice voting. You can see that you can vote for up to 5, meaning you can cast 1 vote, 2 votes, 3, 4, or 5, or you can click abstain and not vote at all on a particular group of elections. So we do want to emphasize that for everyone. The questions and concerns come up throughout the year. How do I vote on campground board members I don't know, or how do I vote for campgrounds that I'm not involved with? You do not have to. As a delegate, it's your choice to vote on only the campgrounds you may be interested in, or only the individuals you're aware of and confident in. That's fully up to you on how you choose to exercise your vote. And you'll have that option within the electronic ballot. So vote for none, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 candidates, and then submit your ballot, and then you should get a confirmation that it was submitted. For those of you who might share an email address, so if you and your partner have the same email address, we can only send the ballot to one email address, and I have a note of everyone so far who has a duplicate. We can get a second key that we can email to you outside of the system, and then you have to take that, go to the website, and enter that second, basically a ballot number to get your access to the second ballot. So I have that list of all of you who are in that case. I'll be reaching out to you as well this week to ask if you might have a second email address. Some of you might have one you just don't regularly use. So right now I've got, I think, 10 people who registered with the same email address as someone else. And I will be reaching out to you to ask if you'd like me to change one of your email addresses to get your own unique message. If not, that's okay. Like I said, I can get a second code and we'll email it to you during the conference. The second person will just have to get that code and go in and vote a second time that way. For those who are coming in person and have no email address, we do have the option to either print out a paper ballot or set you up on a computer so that you can vote directly. If you vote on a paper ballot, then we'll have someone enter it in for you. Enter that ballot in for you. So those are kind of the options we have for voting. The biggest concern again is that this message goes to your spam or your junk folder and you don't see it, or it gets blocked and doesn't get to you at all. That's why we do the test message right now. So again, check today, give it a few minutes, couple hours, but if you don't have it by the end of today, send me an email, let me know you didn't get it. I can go in and resend the invitation. And hopefully we get it all figured out before next week. Any questions on the voting and elections now that you have that ballot and can see it more? Eleanor or Ann?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I tried it and it gave me an error because I didn't vote for anybody but the Park of the Pines. And it looks like you have to vote in each section for it to go through.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Good point. So in order to not vote on the others, you'll have to click the box that says abstain.
Okay, that would take care of that then. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great question. So yeah, I'll put that in my notes to remind everyone. So if you do want to vote just on Park of the Pines, you can do that. But in order to not vote for the others, you'll have to click abstain under Blue Water and Sanford. That'll allow you to submit your ballot the way you want to. Thank you for bringing that up. I'll make sure I note that during the conference as well. You do have the option to simply not vote for anyone. Of course, just don't submit a ballot, and that some people may not. But if you're like Eleanor or someone else who wants to vote on one or two campgrounds and not the other, clicking that abstain box on the one you don't want to vote on is the way to do that. Okay, so we're hoping this will go smooth and we'll have this result at this point in our meeting. So I think I went over these. I had a slide I forgot. So again, you'll get the email with your vote code or link. If you don't have a unique email address, I'll send you that separately outside of Election Buddy to give you a second ballot code. If you don't have an email at all, then you'll be attending. You wouldn't be online, I don't think, if you didn't have an email, because you wouldn't get the Zoom link. So then you'll have to submit a ballot as we work it out there at Blue Water. And again, that test election is out now, and it'll be open until next Friday at 10 o'clock. So if you have any issues, email me, call me during the week. If we haven't figured it out by next Friday, we will be able to talk more during the last prep session. And hopefully by Friday night, we'll have everyone ready to vote on Saturday. Special orders, continuing on, are sustaining the First Presidency's recommendation for Mission Center President and Financial Officer. And as I mentioned earlier, these will be separated again. They really have been, practically speaking, but officially they will be. So the recommendation letter in your packet on page 10. Oh, page before that, page 9 is for the Mission Center President and Financial Officer. These are positions that are appointed by the First Presidency and sustained by the conference. So the First Presidency is appointing myself as Mission Center President, Jessica Montague as Mission Center Financial Officer. I did have a question, came in the chats, reading through the financial matters, and says we have 2.5 paid employees, half-time Mission Center President. Are you working for us somehow for the other 50%? And no, my paid time is 19 hours. So a couple reasons for doing that, some personal reasons. we made that shift during the start of the pandemic in 2020. In 2022, we continued that. One reason is that going over that 19 hours, currently the Mission Center officer positions were required to be on World Church human resource payroll, and anyone at 20 or more hours was required to have to make payments for their benefits system, even though I was not taking the benefits. And I didn't think that was equitable for the Mission Center to have to pay those costs for something we weren't receiving. So that was one motivation to be under the 20 hours limit. And then there was a comment about occupying more than 100% of my life. So, well, I that's always a struggle of work-life balance. I do try to keep my hours to that 19 on average. So some weeks it's certainly a lot more and others less, but I attempt to. Of course, all of you who've been in church leadership positions know that that is not easy and doesn't always happen, but that is the current status. So, and that is the plan for next year as well. Be half-time Mission Center president. We'll have flexibility with a specific number of hours, but most likely it'll stay at 19. And then full-time for the Mission Center financial officer and the Mission Center invitation support minister. That will recommendation comes from the president of 70, which is on page 10. Recommendation is to continue with Linda Stanbridge in that role. So none of these will be changes other than technically the Mission Center financial officer will go back to Jessica. And Apostle Mackay will chair for those sustaining votes so that those of us involved won't be in the chair. And then we will turn to sustaining Mission Center leaders. An initial list for those on page 11. There were some to be determined there, which I think most will be filled in by the full packet you'll get this weekend. There might still be a couple more of those on the list. And as I mentioned, the diversity team members will change from what's printed in this packet. We will ask for a sustaining vote on these leaders. And then we'll move on with our special orders. They're just items that have to be done for operations of the conference or kind of have a timetable to them. The next special orders will be consideration of priesthood calls. And the statements start for these on page 16. I just have the list before you. Calls to 70 will be Ruth Eaton and Karen Smith. The high priest, Lisa Meyer, Carla Parks, Troy Piper, Dorothy Summer, and Linda Stanbridge. And to high priest and evangelist, Pam Luce and William Purcell. So you can read their statements in the packet, and then they'll also give brief responses during the business session, a minute or two to share their response to the call. I think what we'll do this year, we're going to have Locke give a sort of a statement to all of the calls at once, since the Council of 12 is involved in approving these. And then we will probably take a motion on the 70 calls together, have each person speak and vote together as a group, the same with high priest and the same with evangelists, just to save a little bit of procedural time from having 10 separate motions and votes. And then I guess just as a reminder, if these calls are approved, our plan for ordinations is for the two evangelists to be immediately after the business, right before we break for lunch. We'll have a closing worship with those two ordinations. After the lunch break, now Saturday afternoon, will be the high priest ordinations. Added to that list will be an ordination of Dave Cushway, whose call was approved at the last conference, but he was still completing classes and his preparation. So we don't have to vote on his call again, but the ordination will be Saturday afternoon. And then Sunday morning, in that worship will be the 70 ordinations. So our worship on Saturday, right at the end of business, will focus on blessings, since that's the role of the evangelist. On Saturday afternoon, it will focus on vision, since that's a key role of the high priest. And on Sunday morning, it will focus on invitation as a key role for the 70s. At that point, we're at our last class of business, which is new business, and we have 3 resolutions submitted from congregations. These are at the end of your packet. The first resolution, number 3, is authorization to sell the campus ministry center. Resolve that the Journey House building be offered for sale, and resolve that the funds from such a proposed sale be used after following all directives and procedures regarding the sale of church properties for the use of the mission center in support of congregational initiatives. I did prepare pretty extensive additional information on this resolution. So there's almost a page and a half of information for you to read if you haven't already. We wanted to give all the delegates the data about the building, loans, values, what its use has been, what its current usage is, the description of the property, some of the updates on that. So that's all there for you to read. Also in the full packet in the financial report, one of those breakdowns of those funds will be the campus ministry fund. So you can see the income and expenses through September for the campus ministry fund. So we'll have all that information, but we'd love to take questions that anybody might have now and on Friday to make sure you're prepared to debate and vote on this resolution. What would you like to ask about resolution 3? Don't see any questions. I'll just point out that this is a resolution to authorize the sale. As any property in the church, it's owned by the presiding bishopric as trustee and trust. And so a sale has to be approved by them finally. Also, mission center officers and the field apostle would be involved in the approval process and the actual sale of the property. Similar for congregation buildings or campgrounds or any church entity. This would just be authorizing the possibility for sale. We would still have to explore, listing agreements and specifics and get to an actual sale document if this were authorized. So this is just the first step if the conference wants to authorize the sale. Okay, not seeing any questions yet. Resolution 4 submitted by the Coldwater congregation. 3 was submitted by Coldwater. Number 4 submitted by Bay City congregation. This is a proposal regarding Sanford Campground board positions. The resolved that the 2 vacant positions with 2 remaining years in their term ending December 31st, 2024, be added to the slates to be elected and filled by vote of the Mission Center Conference. There is additional information, again, explaining this resolution, but the ruling that the chair will make is there in bold. The proposed resolution conflicts with the Michigan campground operating policy currently in force. This policy is implemented upon the authority of the presiding bishopric, according to Community of Christ bylaws. The resolution would be null and void if adopted. Thus, the resolution is an improper motion and is not in order. So the resolution was proposing that the 2 unfilled positions currently would be added as part of the conference's election. But the campground operating policy, as outlined in the additional information, states that in the event a director resigns, on the case of death, or is removed from office, the board may declare the position vacant. And if the board declares a position vacant, a replacement may be elected by a majority vote of the board to fill the unexpired term. So that policy outlines how to fill vacancies. The board is aware of that. The board has taken action to fill a vacancy earlier in the year. The board did vote or have these 2 vacancies come up this year. The resignations came in July. The board took action in August, but the action was to postpone the election until after the fall conference when the 5 open seats were filled. So that's the board's plan. This motion was asking that the conference fill those 2 vacancies, but it's not in order because of the conflict with the operating policy, which comes from the presiding bishoprics authority in the bylaws. What questions do you have about the resolution and the ruling that's there? Okay. Also noted then there in the ruling is that this was not in the prep packet, that because the campground operating policy is what's in conflict here, and it comes from the presiding bishoprics authority through the bylaws, and that's why the motion is not in order. The proposed resolution would still be null and void if the chair's decision were overturned and the motion adopted. Thus, appeal would be dilatory and is not in order. So in most cases, when the chair makes a ruling, the body can appeal that chair, which means the question comes to the body. So on a particular point of order, the chair can rule one way, and someone can appeal that, which would then put it to the body to decide rather than just the chair. In this case, appeal is not in order because even if the body wanted to appeal, overturn the chair's decision, approve the resolution, it would still be null and void. The presiding bishopric has confirmed that it would be a conflict with their policy and their authority under the bylaws. So even if the conference took all those actions, it would be a moot point, and thus appeal would just be a waste of the conference's time in this context. So appeal is not in order. Dick Pennington?
Dan, wouldn't the election have already been declared, identifying the people by this time, which would have already declared this as a mute issue?
No, this is to fill 2 vacant seats. So these are for terms not being elected by the conference. So
I
these are,
I thought that you said that the board was going to have all 5 seats filled at the same time.
so the conference elects the 5 seats that are eligible this year. These are for 2 other seats. They were elected 2 years ago, I believe, and there's been a vacancy in them. And that this resolution is saying the conference wants to fill that vacancy. The campground operating policy says when a vacancy occurs, the board fills the vacancies, not the conference. So the board only elects those 5 members who will be starting full 3-year terms.
And so what was the purpose of the board delaying their selection of people before?
Well, the board doesn't have a position on that, and there was discussion and various reasons were brought up by various board members. So there's not a board decision, but the decision was to hold their vote to fill the vacancies after the fall conference. So for various reasons, board members, and it wasn't a unanimous decision, but the majority decision of the board was, for whatever their individual reasons were, they wanted to wait on filling those 2 seats until knowing who the 5 new board members will be.
Well, that decision confuses me, but that's their board. Okay, thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome. Yeah. So, there are various points brought up onto why they wanted to do that.
But I'm in concurrence with your ruling as the parliamentarian resolution or declaration there as the chair. That's fully in keeping with my understanding of Robert's rules too. It's out of order. I'm in concurrence with what you've said there in the ruling.
Okay, we have a similar situation with resolution 5, so submitted by the Sanford congregation. The resolved paragraph state that no capital expenditures shall be considered for any Michigan Community of Christ campground until a complete long-range plan that focuses on the mission, vision, goals that are aligned with the future of camping programs has been approved by each campground board, other than the day-to-day expense of maintenance, and resolve that these plans should be completed, approved by the campground boards, and ready for presentation to Mission Center Conference no later than the 2023 Fall Michigan Mission Center Conference. The ruling and statement is the same as Resolution 5. The proposed resolution conflicts with the Michigan Campground Operating Policy currently in force. This policy is implemented upon the authority of the presiding bishopric according to Community of Christ bylaws. The resolution would be null and void if adopted. Thus, the resolution is an improper motion and is not in order. And in the same case, appeal is not in order. I'm realizing today as I look at the packet that the additional information was cut off in what got sent out. So there's a little bit of additional information, but in the full packet, I will make sure that the campground operating policy statements that apply to this are printed for your information. But essentially, the campground operating policy makes it clear that boards are responsible for management of campgrounds, including expenses, and that boards are responsible for strategic planning of campgrounds. And so for the conference to take action to say that a board cannot make any improvements or can restrict how it can manage the campground would not be in order because of the conflict with the operating policy. And I'll have those operating policy statements in the full conference packet. So I will say that certainly these motions, these proposed resolutions will be brought to the attention of the campground boards. Board members will see them and we will talk about them as a combined executive committee and in the board meetings. I think the intent expressed in both of these has been heard. The combined campground committee is looking at the process of resignations and filling vacancies, and some amendments are being proposed and considered through that process, which involves the campground officers, mission center officers, and the presiding bishopric. And similarly, the campgrounds have all been working on strategic planning. It's not an easy process, and there are many parameters they have to face, including church guidelines, budget constraints, state guidelines and requirements, and then what do the user groups want from the mission center and others. So this work is ongoing, and I think these resolutions highlight for all of us doing that work the desires of some in the mission center, but the resolutions as they're written are not in order because they propose the conference take actions that are rested with the boards through the presiding bishopric. Okay, that brings us to the end of the business items. And so I'm going to stop my screen share and just take some time now to open it up for questions you have. Again, going back to anything on the conference, or now that we've been through anything, if something we went over before came back to your mind. Is it Ron?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I just curious, are we gonna get a new packet out before the conference? Because it sounds like there was updates or something that you were gonna do, or my misunderstanding?
That's correct. So there will be a new packet.
Okay.
Hopefully today, that will come out. It will have additional financial reports through September 30th. It'll have a couple of corrections, some additional leaders, fill in those to be determined. And a
Okay.
couple notes I made today, like the
Okay.
additional information on resolution 5 and standing rules.
Okay, just wanted to know, I was a little confused on it and saves me from printing out the previous packet then.
Yes, yes. So there will be a couple of changes. I don't think it'll impact any of, everything that was in here, I believe, is the final business items with the exception of those names on the volunteer list and potentially that one additional standing rule.
Thank you.
So the rest of the things that'll come in the full packet are going to be reports. Any other questions or comments, thoughts, any way we can help you be better prepared for next Saturday? I don't see anyone, so I think we're going to bring this to a close. I'm going to stop the recording.